Welcome to the South Australian Drought Hub podcast, strengthening drought resilience for our farmers and regional communities.
Saying it's a dry season is a gross understatement. It's been a year in which numerous records have been broken, and sadly, none of them have been remotely helpful to the farming sector. G'day, I'm Drew Radford, and for the last few years, SA Drought Hub has been helping farmers prepare for dry times and drought. Indeed, in the last financial year alone, they held nearly 140 learning events, attended by over 4,000 people. Now that we are in dry times, what happens to the focus of the hub? And how do they work with primary producers through these challenging conditions? To delve into that, I'm joined by Dr. Stephen Lee, Director of SA Drought Hub, Tony Randall, the Hub Knowledge Broker, and also Rachel May, Farming Systems Adoption Officer for the Hub. Thank you all for your time.
It's great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Steve, what sort of season has South Australia been facing in terms of, I guess, the context of records? You know, winter and maybe before that, what position are we in?
Yeah, South Australia at large is in a pretty challenging season, Drew. If we cast back to spring 2023, that was a well below average spring rainfall for lots of the key farming regions across South Australia. And then we had a really late start in 2024, so lots of farmers didn't experience a break in season till well into June, which has meant delayed crop and pasture emergence. And what we've observed since then, and right across many of our key regions, is really hasn't been a lot of rainfall since. So at Roseworthy, where I'm based, it's lowest rainfall on record since records commenced in 1900 for year-to-date rainfall. And I think most of the key farming regions across South Australia are decile 1 and below.
So arguably some of the worst conditions on record. The Drought Hub's funded by the Future Drought Fund. A key word in there is future, i.e. preparing for dry times. And that, my impression, has been largely the work of the hub to date. Are growers, do you think, in a better position than ever to deal with dry seasons because of this foundational work?
Yeah, absolutely. And casting back prior to the existence of the hub, a lot of the research and development that's been undertaken over the past decades, and it's now being adopted through the efforts of the hub. So things like timely and early sowing have really helped with biomass production in challenging seasons. The use of containment feeding systems have helped with better managing stock and feed base and pastures. Similarly, we can see that there's still further challenges to overcome. The mission of the hub's really around drought preparedness and drought resilience adoption. That's where we place our effort. Part of that includes working with farmers on timely decision making for both in-season tactical decisions as well as those longer-term strategic decisions about enterprises.
You've kind of preempted my next question, because I was wondering, now we are in technically a dry time, for want of a better description. Does that change the hub's role to any great extent?
There's a nuanced change to the types of work we'll be undertaking. So our work is really focused around drought resilience adoption and preparedness. With this challenging season, we've had a greater effort around workshops right across South Australia with farming systems groups, with consultants, both large-scale awareness events, but also deeper day-long workshops focused on creating actions and take-home activity plans for farmers, but they've been focused on drought resilience adoption. So we've had more workshops, more activities than typical in the timely decision-making, I think, and probably slightly fewer of the really long-term efforts for drought resilience building.
Maybe then, to find out a little bit more about some of that work, I turn to you, Rachel. What are some of the key drought resilience tactics for grain growers that you've been helping out with?
I guess one of the projects I'm working on is de-risking the seeding program. That's the name of the project, but it's essentially about crop establishment of early and dry sown crops. So with those projects, farming systems groups are tackling different aspects of dry seeding, and this year has been a perfect year for that, and it's created lots of conversation about timely decision making in the time of sowing, and farmers been able to pivot what they're doing on farm as they go along and as the season progresses. At the beginning of the season, there were about 86% of farmers did some dry seeding, but that may vary from, say, a small portion of their property through to the whole cropping program. This season has seen most farmers dry seeding, but larger extents of their programs. But I think it's also challenged their confidence. It's raised a lot more questions than answers in some respects, but it's getting the conversation started.
Why is that?
Challenges with, I guess, what works in some areas on some soil types, like in sandier soils, the long coleoptile type wheat varieties are working quite well, but then when you transfer that technology to heavier soils, it doesn't have the same response. On those sandy soils, the roots are able to get down and access any subsoil moisture that's there, whereas in the heavier soils, it's not happening so much. So it's just getting farmers to consider what their options are, whether it's maybe not deep sowing, maybe it's more shallower sowing on those heavier soils. I mean, that's only one component of it. I mean, there's pre-emergent herbicides to take into consideration, seeding systems, whether it's disc or tine systems, but really that subsoil moisture this year. If farmers have that subsoil moisture and we're able to sow early into that, the crops have established much better.
I'm getting the impression your services have been never more in demand in terms of the work that you do for the Hub.
Yeah, it's very topical at the moment. And that project covers several states as well, but it's really been highlighted in South Australia. The conversations the farmers are having around it, it's just given a scope to take that project further, I think.
Rachel, not only has it been challenging on a rainfall front, but it's also been challenging on a cold front.
It certainly has. Across the state, there's been pretty broad spread frosts, which have taken out a range of crops at various stages. In a normal season, some of those, if they haven't flowered yet, may recover if there's moisture there, but that doesn't seem to be forthcoming. So I guess with Drought Hub, we do have some projects, some demonstration sites around the place in the mid-north and upper north, helping farmers to direct their decisions around how to manage drought going forward, whether that's the selection of the varieties they're sowing, time of sowing, that kind of thing. So it's not going to stop a frost happening, but there's tools in place and there's people and projects in place that we can help to support them through that.
To say there's a lot going on for the Hub and what you're trying to support out there is a bit of an understatement. Tony, you can drill down a little bit more on that, I think.
Steve mentioned the decision-making workshops and those types of activities that we've been working on. So they've included things like containment feeding, sticky beak days, where producers have gone out and visited other farmers that have done this stuff, and they've had a chat about what it is that's worked and what hasn't worked, and you know how they can go about getting these things in place on their properties. We've had a series of climate workshops, so we've looked at what the seasonal outlooks are, what the longer term outlooks are for climate change, to help people with decision making around that, so they're ahead of what's predicted. Steve mentioned the deep dive, so that's really about people learning how to use the decision tools that are out there around livestock nutrition requirements and feed budgeting, so you can start to calculate and factor in how much this is going to cost and what rations you need to provide your livestock to keep them at a certain condition over a period of time when you quite possibly haven't got a lot of feed in the paddock. And that goes hand in hand with the containment feeding. Aside from that, we've had a program run by our livestock adoption officer, Penny Schultz, and that's been upskilling advisors, livestock advisors in containment feeding and how to do that really effectively and how to provide that advice really efficiently to farmers. And there's been a range of tools that have been developed to assist them with that. That's been a project that's been run across Southern Australia, not just in South Australia, led from South Australia by Penny. A range of agronomic type projects that we've been up to have included filling feed gaps, so that's really about producing more fodder and being able to increase the quality of that fodder and improve storage. Water security on farm, so things like using commercially available tank monitors and trough monitors so that people can get a water saving and an efficiency of time because they can manage their water resources more remotely. And mixed species pastures, because that can extend the growing season for pasture and then obviously the grazing opportunities that brings.
To say there's a few programs going on there is an understatement to say the least. Perhaps I should have actually asked Steve beforehand, what is the picture with livestock?
Yeah, so while livestock prices have recovered, Drew, obviously the challenging season has meant that farmers are needing to make a series of decisions pretty quickly around stocking rates, which stock to carry through, and also around provision of supplementary feed. Tony mentioned before as well the mixed species pastures work. So in seasons like this year where crops may have been frosted and there's opportunities to cut for hay, there's still opportunities to then get potentially another graze off of that, or in our mixed species pastures, it's not too late. If we get rain, they will respond and they'll respond well, and there'll be opportunities to graze there as well. So there's been significant challenge for producers right across the state, but there are also amazingly resilient systems that are being highlighted through that, which has been a good learning opportunity for producers and working out how to tackle a really tough season.
While you're dealing with what's in front, the long-term focus continues as well. And I understand you're doing industry development work as well.
We're really proud of the industry development work that we are doing in conjunction with a range of partners, largely landscape boards and farming systems groups in South Australia. We've got a young farmers program which Northern and York Landscape Board are leading. As the name suggests, it's about engaging young farmers and getting them together so that they can discuss issues that they're having and come up with solutions together as a group.
In terms of some of that industry development work, internships in particular, you've got one that you're pretty proud of that's just coming online.
In partnership with the South Australian Grains Industry Trust and Mallee Sustainable Farming, a grower group from South Australia's Mallee and Victorian Mallee, we're supporting an intern in that region. This will be the first time there's been an intern with that group. We've also, in partnership with SA Grains Industry Trust, supported interns over the last couple of years with the Hart Field Site Group and also Air EP, which have been fantastic. And the grower group placement of those interns has led almost 100% to those interns remaining within those regions and getting full-time agronomic work within those regions. So it's really hitting the mark in what we're trying to achieve, and that's to build the skills and capacity in regional South Australia of agronomic staff and people who can be independent agronomists.
What about on the research side as well? Are there opportunities there?
That's the beautiful thing about it, Drew. SADI are also involved in the program, and they provide opportunities for the interns to work with their very experienced researchers and undertake research projects either in the field or at the Wade Institute at their facilities there.
Now, I know drought emergency response is not in your wheelhouse, but you also have tools that you help with in terms of resilience and wellbeing support. What are some of those that are on offer?
The SA Drought Hub's worked really closely with John Gladigo and Kate Gunn around mental health and wellbeing through their iFarm Well program, and we've also been really pleased to be able to partner with them in the Kick Off Your Boots 2024, which is at Loxton.
How can producers engage with SA Drought Hub?
We're a statewide network. Our team spreads right across the state. I'd really encourage anyone who wants to learn more about the work of the Drought Hub to jump on our website, sadroughthub.com.au. Equally, our primary impact pathways through our farming systems groups or grower group members right across South Australia. So if you're a member of those groups, please get involved in our activities. If you're not, I'd really encourage you to reach out to those grower groups. I'd really encourage producers and stakeholders from right across industry to engage with the hub through our team, our no coordinators, our adoption officers, and innovation and knowledge broker as well.
It's such a broad church and it's not a one-way street. You take ideas on as well. So if people have ideas for ongoing drought resilience projects, how could they work with the hub?
There's two ways. So one's drop an idea on our website. There's a link there. But more importantly, pick up the phone or send an email through to our team. All of the efforts in the hub are co-designed and co-delivered. So we're highly collaborative and our work is always ground up.
The hub's a huge bonus for the state and it's such a broad umbrella under which so many work. For now though, Dr. Stephen Lee, Tony Randall and Rachel May, thank you so much for joining me for this SA Drought Hub podcast.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
And that concludes this podcast. You'll find more podcasts on the SA Drought Hub website at sadroughthub.com.au. The South Australian Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub is one of 8 hubs established across the nation through the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. The SA Drought Hub is an exciting initiative which brings together a dynamic network of primary producers, industry groups, researchers, government agencies, universities, agribusinesses, farming systems groups, traditional owners and others to work towards a common vision to strengthen the drought resilience and preparedness of farms and regional communities in SA. Led by the University of Adelaide in partnership with the Department of Primary Industries and Regions South Australia, the Hub is responsible for driving the extension of existing knowledge and practices to build drought resilience in primary production systems.